Pain begins as a quiet guest, but it ends as a tyrant. It starts in the marrow, a dull, rhythmic ache that makes your bones feel like brittle glass under the weight of an angry sky. You cry out for mercy, not because you are pious, but because you are failing. There is no health in this body, only the stench of wounds that have begun to fester. A clinical reality of the choices we tell ourselves we've forgotten. This is the anatomy of ruin. Friends avoid the sight of your decay. Neighbors stay far away, as if ruin were contagious. You have become the architect of your own collapse, a man drowning in a shadow he cast himself. But as you sink into the miry clay, with the weight of your secrets pulling at your ankles like cold iron, the silence of God becomes a deafening roar. In this absolute darkness, where even the light has gone from your eyes, a terrifying question remains. Can a man survive the weight of his own shadow? The skin is pale as parchment, written over with the ink of old regrets. Sin is not an abstract concept here. It is a weight. The guilt is a physical burden, a mountain of wet stone strapped to a back already broken by searing pain. You go about mourning all day, bowed down, brought very low, until your heart pounds like a trapped bird against the ribs. Your strength fails, leaving you to stare into a darkness that stares back. The bone-deep ache we carry is not merely a phantom of the flesh. It is an inheritance. We were born into the fracture, stained from the very moment of conception, woven in the womb with the threads of an ancient rebellion. Look at the basin. The water is cold and the stone is hard. To ask for mercy is to admit that the verdict is already just. Against the silence, and the silence alone, have we sinned. We offer no excuses, no alibis of circumstance. The request is terrifying. Cleanse me with hyssop. In the old world, hyssop was the brush used to paint the doorposts with blood. It is a purification that requires a death. We ask to be washed until we are whiter than the snow that falls on the cedars of Lebanon, yet we stand in the mud of our own making. Hide your face from what I have done, but do not cast me from your presence. This is the delicate tension of the Great Confession. We desire the gaze of the Creator, yet we fear the light that reveals the rot. Restore the joy, because without it, we are merely ghosts haunting our own ribs. The sacrifice required is not a burnt offering or the blood of bulls. The smoke of such things cannot reach the heavens. No, the only currency accepted in the court of the eternal is the weight of a broken spirit. It is the sound of a heart cracking open to reveal the truth. When the old heart is shattered, the vacuum is filled by a terrifying clarity. Out of the depths, the voice does not merely speak, it shatters. It is a cry from the hollowed-out places of the soul, where the air is thick with the scent of stagnant water and old failures. If the ledger of sins were to be opened now, in this absolute darkness, who could stand? Not the king, not the priest, and certainly not the man trembling in the mud. The silence of unconfessed sin is a predator. When you keep quiet, your bones waste away, your strength is sapped as if by the midsummer sun. To confess is to breathe while drowning. The moment the iniquity is acknowledged, the heavy hand of the divine, which felt like a crushing weight, suddenly becomes the hand that pulls the body from the silt. Now, the soul enters the state of the long vigil. You become like a watchman on the high walls of a besieged city, staring into a horizon so black it feels permanent. You wait for the Lord more than watchmen wait for the morning. Your eyes ache for the first gray sliver of dawn, for the redemption that is not just a feeling, but a tactical rescue. For if the ledger is closed, the gates must eventually open. Safety is a ghost that vanished with the light. Now the world is a labyrinth of shadows, and every corner hides a breath that is not your own. Can you hear it? The soft slide of steel against leather, the rhythmic murmur of those who have made your ruin their holy mission. They do not fight you in the sun. They whisper in the dark, weaving a net of lies so fine you don't even know you're tangled until the cord snaps tight. The weight of being hunted is not a metaphor. It is a physical cold that settles in the marrow. Your enemy pursues you, crushing your life into the very dirt, forcing you to dwell in the lightless places like those long dead. Your spirit grows faint. Your heart is not just broken, it is dismayed, a hollowed-out fortress waiting for the final breach. You spread your hands in the dark, parched, thirsting for a sign, but the sky is as silent as the blade behind the curtain. How do you find the right path when your own feet are trapped? You plead for the morning to bring word of a love that doesn't betray, because in this forest of traps, your integrity is the only shield left, and it is battered thin. You are a man standing on a tripwire, surrounded by numerous foes who hate without cause. You hide yourself in the one thing they cannot touch, begging for the Spirit to lead you onto level ground. There is a specific kind of cold that no fire can touch. It is the chill of a chair left empty at the table, or worse, a chair filled by a man who has already sold your life for a handful of silver. You sat there, didn't you? You shared the bread. You watched the same light flicker across his face, a face you loved. And yet, even as he broke the crust, his heart was gathering slander like a scavenger collects carrion. The realization that the hand reaching into the dish is the same hand that will later point the way for the guards is a desecration. It tastes like gall. It burns like vinegar forced into a parched throat. When the walls of your own home turn into the bars of a cage, the zeal for what is holy begins to consume you from the inside out. You become a foreigner to your own mother's children, a ghost haunting your own hallways. They whisper in the dark, imagining the worst for you, waiting for your strength to fail so they can claim your inheritance. They mock your tears and turn your lament into the song of the drunkards. You look for sympathy and find an empty desert. You look for comforters and find only the shadow of the man who shared your bread. To wait for the divine is not a passive thing. It is a slow strangulation. You have been gasping in the miry depths, the thick black silt of your own failures filling your lungs until the surface is only a memory. You called out, but your throat was parched and the mud was greedy. Then, a hand. It does not pull you into a dream, but onto the brutal, jagged reality of a rock. He lifts you out of the slimy pit, out of the muck that swallowed your dignity, and sets your feet on a foundation that does not yield. Feel the granite beneath your heels. It is cold, hard, and terrifyingly real. The silence that once mocked you is suddenly shattered. He places a song in your mouth, not the frantic whimpering of a victim, but a hymn of praise, a war cry of the rescued. But here is the sting. You realize now that he never wanted the blood of your goats or the smoke of your altars. Those were mere shadows. What he desired was the opening of your ears, the surrender of the heart that thought it could bargain with the absolute. Here I am, you whisper, the salt of the pit still drying on your skin. You are poor, you are needy, and the enemies who mocked your fall are suddenly silenced by the shadow of the one who stands behind you. You have tried to hide. You have sought the comfort of the shadows, thinking they were a shroud. But there is a gaze that penetrates the marrow, a presence that was there before your first breath rattled in your lungs. You are not a ghost in the machine. You are a design. He has searched you. He knows the precise moment you rise and the heavy weight of your sitting down. Before a word even forms on your tongue, a half-formed thought, a lie you haven't yet told, He knows it completely. He hems you in. Behind you, the ghosts of your past. Before you, the uncertainty of the grave. His hand is always there, heavy as lead, precise as a surgeon's blade. Such knowledge is not a comfort, it is a terror. It is too lofty to attain. Where would you go to escape this spirit? If you ascend to the heavens, He is the light that blinds you. If you make your bed in the depths of Sheol, among the rotting bones and forgotten names, He is there in the cold. Even on the wings of the dawn, or settled on the far side of the unforgiving sea, His right hand holds you fast. To Him the darkness is not dark. The night shines like the stadium glare of midday. He saw your unformed body when you were being woven together in the secret place, a complex web of golden thread vibrating in the void of the womb. All your days were written in His book before one of them came to be. But the cosmic gaze is not a sentence of death. It is the only thing preventing your total disintegration. To be known so intimately is to be loved with a terrifying precision. Praise the Lord, my soul, and forget not a single one of His benefits. He does not merely overlook your decay, He redeems your life from the very edge of the pit. He crowns that same shivering, fragile skull with a diadem of love and compassion. Look at the horizon. As high as the heavens are above the earth, so great is the scale of this mercy. It is not a measured forgiveness, but a geographical exile for your failures. As far as the east is from the west, that is how far He has cast your transgressions away into the void. He knows the material of your making. He remembers, even when you forget, that you are nothing but dust, a handful of earth, momentarily animated by a divine breath. The life of a mortal is like grass. It flourishes like a flower in the field, and then the wind of the desert blows over it, and its place remembers it no more. But for those who fear Him, the dust is given wings. Your youth is renewed like the eagle's. You are pulled from the ash and set to soar over the ruins of your own history, looking down on the parched earth you once crawled upon. How can dust be crowned with love? Because the Sage of Ages looks upon the flicker of your life and sees more than a vanishing shadow. Therefore, even as the city burns, the Spirit remembers its wings. The sun does not set to provide rest. It sets to remind you of the coming dark. My days vanish like smoke, curling into a sky that no longer hears. My heart is blighted, a withered blade of grass crushed under the weight of an invisible heel. I have forgotten the taste of bread, for my throat is thick with the dust of my own undoing. I eat ashes. I drink my own tears, mingling the salt of my sorrow with the cold remains of what I once was. Look at the ruins. There, on the jagged lip of a fallen wall, sits the owl, a solitary sentinel in the wasteland. I am like that bird, awake in the silence, a ghost among the stones. While the world sleeps, I count the beats of a failing heart. My enemies use my name as a curse, but their malice is nothing compared to the silence of the throne. You have taken me up only to throw me aside, like a garment too stained to mend. My life is an evening shadow, stretching thinner and thinner until it merges with the black. Yet, as I wither, you remain. You sit enthroned while the foundations of the earth wear out like old cloth. I am a flicker of a candle. You are the unyielding sun. I am the ruin. You are the architect. When does the shadow finally stop growing long? The silence that follows a scream is the heaviest sound on earth. Look at the smoke. It does not rise to the heavens as an offering. It hangs low, a gray shroud over the jagged remains of what was once called holy. The nations have not just invaded, they have feasted. They have reduced the glory of the temple to a graveyard of scorched limestone and splintered cedar. Where the priest once chanted, the rhythmic thud of the scavenger's wing is all that remains. The servants of the Most High lie in the streets, not in rest, but as a banquet for the birds of the sky and the beasts of the wild. Their blood has been poured out like common water, soaking into the dust of Jerusalem, until the very earth is sick with the metallic tang of slaughter. There is no one left to bury the dead, no one to offer the dignity of a shroud. We have become a punchline for our neighbors, a bitter joke told by those who watch from the safety of the hills. How long, Lord? Will the fire of your jealousy burn until the world is ash? The survivors crawl through the cinders, their faces blackened, sensing the mocking eyes of the victors. The heathens lean on their spears and ask with a grin that cuts deeper than steel, where is their God? It is a question that echoes off the broken walls and vanishes into the void. How many lifetimes does it take to scrub out the stain of a defeat this absolute? We have reached the ledge where the individual scream dissolves into the hum of eternity. You have spent your strength mourning your wounds, counting your enemies, and nursing the burns on your soul. But here the perspective shifts. The mirror of your agony shatters, and you are forced to look beyond your own skin. Lord, you have been our dwelling place before the mountains were born, while we are but grass that springs up in a morning of hope only to wither by the evening's chill. We consume ourselves with the heat of our own importance, yet even 70 years, or 80 if the marrow in our bones holds firm, pass like a sigh in a thunderstorm. 1,000 years in your sight are but a watch in the night, a few hours of darkness while the world sleeps, gone before the first light touches the dew. Consider the phantom. We walk the earth like shadows cast by a flickering flame, rushing about in a frantic race to heap up wealth. We gather gold as if it could buy a seat at the table of the forever, never knowing whose hands will grasp it when our own turn to dust. My life is a mere handbreadth, a sliver of space so thin it barely registers on the scale of the ages. Every man, even the one who stands secure in his palace of pride, is but a breath, a vapor, a mist that vanishes when the sun rises. Why do we rage against the dying of a light that was never ours to keep? If life is a fever dream, it must eventually have an awakening. The desert does not forgive. Yet it was here that the paradox of the human heart was forged. We speak of the wilderness as a place of scarcity, but for them it was a theater of impossible abundance. Imagine a people parched to the marrow, watching a jagged rock split under a staff. Not a trickle, but rivers gushing from the dry crag, soaking the dust, cooling the tongues of the rebellious. The sky itself opened its iron doors to rain down the grain of heaven. They ate the bread of angels until they were gorged, stepping over mounds of manna with the indifference of the spoiled. But hunger is a shapeshifter. Even with the taste of miracles in their mouths, they whispered against the Most High. This was the sting. They tested the divine not out of need, but out of a hollow, aching greed. When the wrath finally broke, a fire consuming the outskirts of the camp, they performed a hollow dance of repentance. They flattered the Almighty with lying tongues, their words smooth as oil, while their hearts remained shards of flint. They remembered he was their rock only when the ground began to shake. It is a terrifying cycle, the way we settle into the mercy of the provider, only to use his own gifts as weapons of defiance. Why does the human heart crave exactly what will kill it? To understand this decay, we must transition from the personal ache to the national tragedy. The suffering of the individual mirrors the failure of the tribe. Look at the men of Ephraim. They stand on the ridge, sun glinting off their bronze, arrows notched in bows that could fell a desert lion. They are the elite, the heavy-handed pride of the covenant. Yet, when the drums of battle finally roll, they do something far more devastating than dying. They turn. The day of battle arrived, but their spirit had already evaporated. They were like a faulty bow, beautifully carved, meticulously oiled, but shattered in the core where it counts. When the tension of the conflict was applied, they snapped. The land they were meant to guard became a graveyard of their own making. Imagine the silence in the streets when the fire broke out. Not the fire of an enemy's torch, but a divine fury that consumed the very marrow of the nation. The young men were taken by the sword, their strength wasted in the dirt. The young women found themselves silhouetted against a setting sun with no songs to sing. No flutes played, no vows were exchanged. The only music left was the crackle of burning timber and the dry sob of widows who had run out of tears. Even the Ark of Might, the golden throne of the presence, was surrendered into the calloused hands of the enemy. The Spirit did not just retreat, it was evicted by the people's own treachery. Yet the silence did not last forever. There's a moment in the pulse of history when the divine patience snaps, not in a flurry of words, but in a terrible, jolting awakening. Imagine a warrior, heavy with the stupor of wine, suddenly lurching to his feet as the smoke of a burning city hits his lungs. The Lord awoke. He beat back the predators of Israel, sending them into an everlasting shame that no monument could cover. But even in victory, the old order was dead. The tabernacle of Shiloh lay in the dirt, a rejected shell. The tents of Joseph were passed over. The pride of Ephraim, once as strong as a war bow, was cast aside like a splintered branch. Instead, the gaze of the Eternal settled on the rugged spine of Mount Zion, the heights he loved. He went to the sheepfolds. He walked into the smell of wool, damp earth, and sweat. He found a youth whose hands were calloused from the staff and scarred from the lion's grip. David. Taken from tending the ewes, he was brought out of the pasture to shepherd the inheritance of a nation. It was a selection that defied the logic of the sword. He led them not with the cold iron of a tyrant, but with a singular, quiet weapon, integrity of heart. And beneath his skillful hands, the broken flock began to find its way home. The agony of the internal secret, the fracture of the bone, the betrayal of the brother, and the collapse of the kingdom, all of it flows toward this singular point. We are a people of the dust, constantly breaking under the weight of our own shadows, yet invited to stand upon a rock that does not yield. We are known in our rot, and in that knowing, we are redeemed. The journey from the miry clay to the heights of Zion is not a march of the strong, but a rescue of the broken. Can integrity of heart truly save what the sword could not? It is the only thing that ever has. In the end, we are left with the echo of a new song in the throat of a man who was once dead. We are but grass, yes, but grass that has felt the dew of a morning that will never end. The ledger is closed. The dawn has arrived, and the shadow, finally, has lost its weight.